Hey, good morning, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I'm making a video to answer the question, what happens when you grow roses indoors under LED lights? And this is a follow-up video to something I did about a month ago, 3 weeks to a month ago, on the same topic, but that was the start of the experiment. So I took two groups of roses, identical in varieties and basic growth stage. I took one, I left it outside on this bench and grew it right here, and the other one I put inside under LED lights. And there were some challenges to going that direction, which I want to talk about in this video, but first I want to show you the results in detail, because the two groups kind of look the same from where you are, I suppose, but there are some subtle growth differences that arrived over about the course of a month. And the conclusion I came to is that actually you can successfully grow roses indoors under lights, but you do have to adjust a couple of things about your growing approach. Okay, first an overview of the two groups. You can see here what the growth looks like after a month on the group that was grown outdoors. There's a flower or two on here. Rose de Recht on the front, and I think that's Laura Ford in the middle there somewhere, if I can even get that to come into focus. But what I did like about the group that was grown outside is just how firm and solid the foliage is. No nutritional problems in the foliage at all. I think if I had to guess, I'd say that the group that was grown inside maybe put on, well, about an even amount of growth. But what you will also see is that it initiated flowering a little bit quicker. So at the front here, Sophie's Perpetual, flowering pretty strongly. In the front corner here, that's Julia Child. I've got buds and buds off of New Dawn, and lots of buds all the way through. So it rushed to flower a little bit faster, but the overall growth is about even. But I want to say one other thing about the growth is that outdoor growth was always thick leaves, firm foliage, had very few nutritional problems. I was feeding both of them all the way through the experiment well. Whereas on the inside, what I ran into was basically two issues. One was to do with spider mites, which I had to tackle really early on. I made a video on the topic sort of at the same time, sort of in timing with when I had the problem with the spider mites on the indoor roses, which I dealt with just with insecticidal soap. No big surprise there, really. If you take the roses away from their natural predators, these ones over here would have been dealing with spider mites as well, but there were natural predators and other insects out here to help deal with them. Inside, I didn't have that, and so the spider mites populations boomed, and I had to deal with them myself. The second thing that I'll say is that inside, I had some issues with nutrient uptake due to what I think was high humidity levels. Especially early on, you would see some symptoms. Here's one that still looks like it's having some issues. And sort of that bronziness, that slight interveinal chlorosis between the leaves, that's an indication that it's having problems with nutrient uptake. It might be calcium or iron or nitrogen, but it was having some issues with that. It wasn't taking its nutrients up, and then what I had to do was increase the air circulation to dry out the pots because they weren't drying off well between waterings, and I also had to raise them up off the floor of the grow tent. So that was the growing challenges. One thing that I was impressed by is how well these kept up, though, because the outdoor ones here still had August sun. In our climate, August means you're still above probably 13 hours of strong, intense daylight all day. And I matched that with the grow lamp inside, but that's pretty impressive that the grow lamp can match the sun and even initiate flowering quite strongly on the indoor ones, which really, for me, as a conclusion to this, and I'll show you something inside before I finish the video, but as a conclusion to this, the nice thing is that that's up against one of the hotter and brighter months of the year. I suspect, of course, that I can do this inside any time of year, whereas these ones will soon, in September, October, and November, start dropping leaves, going dormant. The day lengths will go down outside. The ones that I keep inside will, of course, I will be able to push them as hard as this all year round. So that's the benefit of being able to grow indoors. All right, before I take you back inside to have a look at the growing setup in there that I'm now recommending, I'd like to show you some differences between some of the new cuttings, the newly rooting cuttings, because some of them that I did in the experiment were already rooted, already grown into a 1 gallon size. Some of them I potted up right at the beginning of the experiment, and I want to show you a difference between some of them here. So this one here is Julia Child. In this hand, this one was grown outdoors the whole time. This one was grown indoors. Obvious difference, of course, is that this one has rushed to flower, whereas this one seems to have favored vegetative growth or green growth. So, and that sort of wraps up one thing I saw between the outdoor and the indoor grown ones anyway, is that they seemed to go to flower a little bit quicker. But the question I really had was to do with root growth. How well do they establish? I mean, I like this plant maybe a little bit better, I like this flower a little bit better, but let's see how the root growth did. So for the ones grown outside, I'll say it had some really decent root growth. Maybe not all the way around the pot, but that's a good level of establishment. I will be able to bring that to market for sale early next year at this rate. And the one that was grown indoors also had really, really good root growth. Again, not maybe equally all the way around the pot, but here, that's some really exceptional rooting. So I would say that if you're looking at pushing along the rooting of newly transplanted roses, indoors is not a bad option. So here's the hero of the story. The Mars TS1000 is the lamp that made all of this experiment possible and provided the light to keep those indoor grown roses into the same league as the ones that were grown outdoors in August. So my experience with the lamp has been really good, and the setup I used, and not where it is currently, is in a grow tent. So go ahead and refer back to the previous video for that setup. But I heard feedback directly, both from my family and from other people who grow roses, that the way they'd like to see their roses grown is in a more natural light situation and in some place that they can enjoy it, like here in a living space of the house rather than down in a tent. That satisfies me well, because I found that the tent was difficult in times for spacing and also for maintaining air circulation. Whereas in a more wide open area like this, I can use a stand fan or even something more attractive than that, like a Dyson, to get that gentle air movement that you see on the foliage right now. And the lamp itself adapts nicely to either situation, because one thing I like about it, I've just installed a simple hook up into a roof support, and that's it. And because this lamp is so light, it adapts very nicely to that situation. I can adjust it up or down. So let's have a look at this growing situation and why I've chosen this. And like I say, in the grow tent, they were down against the floor of the grow tent at first. I actually moved them upwards onto to take them off the floor to improve air circulation. And air circulation was the main limiting factor here. I found the humidity through that probe that I showed you in the first video was spiking up to about 70-75% and then staying there. It was having a hard time dispersing of the humidity, so I had to add additional exhaust fans, input fans, circulating fans to get that growing space. But the roses were generally quite tight, as you'll recall, as I put them in there, and I maintained it that way because that's how it was outside. But now in this situation, I can space them much more liberally. I have the windows there to open for circulation, should I want to. My sunflowers in the background, and I have that fan running also at the base here, I basically have a mesh with open air below it. So there's nothing holding the moisture in these pots. They'll be able to transpire, and that should improve their performance dramatically. And that leaves me open to do a lot of other things here too. Like I can use decorative pots and make this look a little bit nicer. One of my goals now that I'm out of the grow tent is to make this an enjoyable growing space. And another thing I like about this lamp is that if you look on the background wall there, that the light it is casting is a rather natural shade. I found that sometimes when dealing with grow lights, they're that blue and purple kind of shade, or even a sort of a pinkish, warmer shade. And this one here is a rather natural light, so my roses look good under it, and I would have no hesitation recommending them. What I may do as I go through the winter is just change out these roses a little bit to bring in some ones that are just ready to bloom or an appropriate size for me to enjoy. I might even add a couple of miniatures in here because miniatures would grow quite nicely in this situation. So that sums up the video. The answer to the question is yes, of course, you can grow roses indoors as long as you're willing to make the adjustments to your growing process. And the one thing I learned through this is to pay special attention to the dispersal of humidity, the air circulation, so that your roses can move through their moisture and draw up more nutrients with every feeding. As I mentioned in the previous video, look in the description below for more details about the grow light itself. Mars Hydro was kind enough to provide that for me for this experiment, and also they're willing to provide you a small discount if you wanted to add this grow light in a situation at your place, a lot like this one, and try it out for growing your roses. Or in this case, I even snuck in some of my herbs. I brought in sage as well, so that I can enjoy that during the winter. And so if you wanted to try something like that, there's a coupon code in the description. And thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about indoor growing or any rose growing, drop those in the discussion as well. Thank you.